Hey there, folks. Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is week 42 of the Quilters Playcation Adventure Sewalong. I am Cheryl Larkison, your ever grateful host on this year-long adventure with a rainbow theme, but it is an adventure into improv sewing and play. Coming to you again today, permanently now, from my new studio. It's still new. It'll be new for a while, so bear with me. I'm still pretty excited. Still kind of setting it up, but we are there. I have some design wall stuff almost finished. Should hopefully finish that up by the end of the week. Still need a desk and still need a few extra shelves in the storage room, but we're pretty much there. I'm sewing in here on the regular. I did a trunk show in here last night. It went really well. The lighting is so much better than at home. But we do have hiccups. So this is Wednesday, not Tuesday, my normal day. I'm glad that I could join today and that you guys, you folks could join today as well. So what you may not realize is that my studio is actually part of a larger space. My husband and I have a cabinet making business, and these are our new offices and workshop space for the business. And right on the other side, through that door, is the kitchen for the offices. There's a lunchroom, and then a small sort of kitchen unit. I shouldn't say small, it's bigger than mine at home, but doesn't have an oven or a stove. But it does have a small dishwasher, and we hooked it up for the first time. Let me rephrase that. We started it for the first time yesterday. Turns out it wasn't hooked up properly, and it flooded everywhere. So I was getting ready to film. All of a sudden there's all this noise and chaos on the other side of the door. So I opened the door and I'm like, dudes, like, what's going on? And they're like, oh, the dishwasher's flooding. There was water everywhere. So they had the shop vac out for like 45 minutes trying to get everything up, and then a fan going. So loud. That is the downside to this location. It's only during lunch hour that it's noisy, that I can hear the guys in there chit-chatting away, but that's their right. We want them to have breaks. So I just put the headphones on during that time and go for it. But I could not do that during yesterday because it was really loud. There's 3 guys there, all the equipment. It was not going to be a pleasant experience for anyone. So we're here today on Wednesday instead. But it's still week, I just said at the beginning of the video, I realized I said 42, 41. It's week 41. I'm jumping ahead of myself here. We are on week 41 of the Quilters Playcation Adventure Sewalong Rainbow Edition. This week's block includes background. So we have some of the, in my case, glorious sort of terrazzo inspired print and my grunge rainbow. So let's get to it. I'm going to flip you around and we'll get to making the block. Let's come over here, turn the camera around, and get down here onto our design table. Cutting table. So I do have to bring them in. They are not hung up, but we will say hello to the ladies. They're hanging out here on my cutting table, keeping me company. So we'll put them there. And otherwise, what are we going to do? So I don't have a sample block made, but I have started the block. We're going to do these. Do we want to call them chevrons? I'm not sure what we want to call them. Maybe a chevron. That is the chevron sort of. We're still on that zigzag kind of thing idea, but this is a chevron. Yeah, we're going with chevrons. Correct me if I'm wrong. We're going to go with this. We're going to make 3 strips where we're going to go background, rainbow fabric, background, rainbow fabric, background. Every strip will look different. They might be different widths. It all depends on how big of a triangle you start with. Right? You can see that the triangle I've cut out here for the next block is similar in size. I might trim that a little bit smaller, or maybe I go bigger, right? Along the way. We're going to play around with that. So I'm just going to set this one aside for now because it's already done and made. The only thing we need to really pay attention to is obviously that we make it tall enough, but we can always add more or less background fabric along the way to get it tall enough. But the width. So my pastel rainbow blocks square up at 10.5 inches, which doesn't really lend itself well to dividing by 3 nicely. So I'm going with an ish sort of measurement. This first one ended up being 4 inches. So that means I have, once it's sewn together, is 3.5. I've got kind of 6 more inches to play with, seven more inches to play with. So I'm probably going to have one a little bit wider than this, one a little bit skinnier. It's always better to have more and then shrink it down and then to go bigger. What order do you do the fabrics in? You can go in rainbow order. You can have fun and play with it different ways. I'm going to kind of chain piece these last 2. I am going to cut, this one's just a little bit big. So these happen to be scraps that I had left over from a previous block. So they were already in this triangle shape. What you want to make sure is that the bottom of the triangle is relatively on grain and that these are your bias edges. It's just going to help the overall block stay a little bit more stable at the end if you keep that bias to there. The whole sides are going to end up being biased because we trim them. So let's start with something that's stable. That will help the block in the end. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to add color to the 2 sides. So I think I'm going to do mine where I'm kind of in rainbow order. So this smaller one will go with the purple and the blue, and then this side will go with the pink and the orange. I'm not going to really care which way I put it, just that if we look at what I have for rainbow order, right? So I've got those 2, and those 2. You can plan it out a little bit more than me, but I'm just winging it. So because I am right-handed, I tend to work on the right-hand side of my block first. So I'm going to sew this first piece on. It's pretty straightforward. We're going to go all the way to the bottom. You're going to want to make sure that the bottom of your rainbow strip goes a little, this is a lot beyond, but you don't want to kind of go here and then have this blank space at the bottom. Give yourself the wiggle room to trim up the way you want. And then likewise, you want to go across the top, because if you imagine a line extending from the top of your triangle, you want to be covering that here as well. So that's my first one there. So we'll just sew those right sides together. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. I have a really wide bit of purple here, which I think is kind of fun. So again, I want to make sure, see, I haven't quite got all the way to the point there. So I may not need all that fabric, but I want to give myself sort of the freedom to play a little bit more. Okay, there we go. Now I know I'm covered and I've got way more than I need here. So I'm just going to trim that off and that will go in the scrap bin. So yes, it is a lot of extra fabric there, but the trimmings can go into the scrap bin. But the important part is that you need something for the next piece to sew onto. Okay. So straightforward sewing here. I'm going to just press those. In this case, I'm pressing out, meaning I'm pressing away from that initial triangle, but every time I add a piece, I will be pressing out. So it's not so much about pressing to the rainbow fabric, although you can. I just find that these blocks are easier if we press consistently kind of out along the way there. So there are our first 2 there. We're going to add the next piece. Same thing. I want to make sure I'm kind of covered here. And I'm going to be going beyond on this. So this is actually kind of the right size piece because I have up there, because my next piece, I'm going to want to make sure I have that point there. Don't worry, it'll make a little bit more sense as we go. Now I have this extra bit right here. I don't need it, right? You can cut it off before, you can cut it off after, but you do need to cut off. And the sharper the angle of your triangle is to begin with, the longer your pieces are going to need to be. If you have kind of more of a stubby triangle, you're not going to need as long of pieces. So just to show you here, this one's going to be fun because I'm going to have this wide side and this skinny side. I've got enough here, and I need to sew to there and have a bit more there. So I don't need all of that. Might as well remove it now. And then I have this that I need to cut off. But you can see I needed all of this here for something to sew to. So again, whether you cut it off before or after is a personal choice. It will also depend on what type of foot you have on your machine. If you have one of those, a presser foot that has the guide on the side for the 1/4 inch, you're going to want to trim off those pieces before you sew. Okay, so there's our first one. We're going to have to add some background now, but there is a little thing we got to pay attention to when we do the background. But I will show you that. Have no fear. Like always, I'm here to hold your hand, especially for those of you for whom improv might feel a little like jumping off a cliff or going on a roller coaster. I got you. I'm going to show you all of the tricks to make it less scary and manage both fabric use and your feelings about it all. So, okay. So now we need to add a white here. And I just want to grab, I don't even know if I have one. There we go. Our instinct, everybody's instinct, is going to be to add another big long white piece there. And then let's pretend it's sewn. I need to pull that up, right? And add another piece there. And then, we're adding more blue, the next one. What are we doing here? All we're doing is creating a giant triangle, and we're going to end up cutting off so much of this stuff on the side. It isn't waste per se, because we can always use those scraps. I got almost all the fabric for today's blocks from the scrap pile. So it isn't a waste, but it's not the most efficient way to do this block. Instead, what I want to do is get my ruler, and I just want to measure kind of how wide am I at this point, right? Where is maybe the point of my block? If I put that there, if that's at 2 1/4 inches, let's stick with that. 2 1/4 inches, another 2 1/4 inches is about here. So my white only really needs to come like that. It doesn't need to come the whole way down, right? We just want to cut. I'll give myself a little bit more wiggle room, right? I'm only going to go to about there, just so that I don't use as much fabric. So I'm going to cut that piece. Just flip that over right now. I probably have even more than I need. And again, I like to trim mine before, and we'll sew that on. So let's show you that again. We've got this piece here. I'm gonna, line up, just kind of pick a mark to be the center of the triangle. Let's move this one over just a little bit more. So now I need a piece that comes kind of roughly there to there. So give my triangle, and I don't need all the extra at the bottom. It was only that first piece we wanted to make sure covered the ends. Now we're wanting to make sure we cover the sides. So as we add pieces, we're going to go through the same motions in terms of checking and double checking as we go. And when it comes down to it, we're going to want to make sure that we're not too high. Look what I did. I've got a little flip there. I'm going to undo that seam. I don't know where my seam ripper is, so I'll use my scissors. There we go. And I'm just going to sew that again real quick, just to make sure. Okay, let's get these pressed. Again, I'm pressing out. Let me show you what I mean. This scrap bin is blocking things. So this is what I mean by pressing out. I'm not pressing towards the pink, I'm pressing towards the edges of the block. So it's going to start to look kind of weird, and you're going to wonder, how does this turn into something? Because we have all these jagged edges. Don't worry, that's the magic of trimming, right? I always say with improv piecing, there comes a point where we need to add the order back in. And in this block's case, that comes with trimming. Okay, so just looking for some long pieces. I don't know if that'll be long enough, but we'll find out. If not, I have. Just gonna cut. Again, I went in the scraps, so I'm cutting there. So I'm gonna remember, grab my ruler. What did I say? The point was at about 2 1/4 inches, right? So I'm good there. So now, depending on how wide I want to make this piece is where I'm going to place this. And I'm going to give myself some wiggle room because I don't actually know how wide I want it to be. I'm just going to move that, go over, and then I don't need all of that length, and I don't need this bit. So I would rather make the piece a little bit wider than necessary and trim it down. Give myself that wiggle room. Okay, let's do this one now. Right, if I'm there at 3 inches, no, I can't go 3 inches because see, I've got to now pay attention to this little corner here. Let me move that up so we can see even a little better. Got to pay attention to where this piece ends. So obviously I don't want to be over here and then that's not going to be wide enough here. So this is now kind of my edge that I'm thinking about as I go. So if I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 inches, right? I really don't even need to have, I just need to have a piece up here. So this shorter one that I saw, probably going to be good. We'll go with it and we'll make it work. So the only thing is now that I do that, see, I'm not going to have a point. So when I go to sew on here, I don't have any fabric here. So that's actually not going to work. So I am going to get a different piece, but I'm going to cut it from something else because I want to keep that long one. There we go. That should help me. So you can always put the piece on, right? And go, okay, well, if that's where that's going to be now, then I'll test and see where I'm at. So should be good, should be more than good there. Everyone just has to kind of figure out their little rhythm for doing these things. Okay, and now I want to show you another little trick over here at the machine. You see how I need to start here? This is where I need to sew, but I have all of this. You can certainly start at the end here and have a seam going the whole way down. I'm lazy, so I just kind of come in from the side and then pivot so that when I hit where that piece of fabric is, now I'm going straight. This affects nothing. It just means you're not using that fabric as you go. Or thread, I mean, because you've sewn this whole way down. I've just come in and made a little turn and got that there. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? I'm going to press this and then we'll move on. So this is a bit more of a time-consuming block. A lot of back and forthing between the ironing board, having to pay attention on our cutting and sewing, but it's not difficult. Okay, now we're going to add the next one. So pink, I'm going to add orange. So I have my orange strips right here. Again, I'm going to use this as my guide for what sort of length I need on a strip, right? So I'm about there, so a little bit extra that I don't need. I'm going to go ahead and sew that on, just like that. Just trimming those extra bits. We're going to do the same thing with the blue here, right? So I want to make sure I've got that edge here, and so I'm going to sew on. I really don't need that much, right? And it's going to go there. I really don't have a very straight edge on the background piece, so when I trim this, I'm going to cut a nice whole fresh cut. You see, trimming off all that kind of extra. All right, making progress, folks. Making progress. Probably have about 3 more seams per block to do, and then we'll be done. Well, and then we have to assemble the block, but that's easy. Okay, see where we're at? So again, I just want to make sure, but now I have 2 seams. I have this one and this one that I need to account for. So I can rotate my ruler if I want, or I can just slide it over to make sure I am accounted for. And now I'm going to put, what did I say? I got 4 inches. So that puts me up here. So just a little strip. So I'm going to go about there. Now I want to show you something. Remember a few seams ago, we talked about making sure we always went to a point. I know that my blocks are 10.5 inches tall. So right here at the bottom, I have it not quite on exactly 10.5 inches. I'm giving myself wiggle room, which means I'm already taller than I need to be. So there is no point making these strips super long to then cut them off. It's the same as no point making it super wide just to cut it off. So if you're wondering why that looks that way, that's why. And I don't know if I'm there on this one yet. No, I'm not. So let's move over. There we go. Still kind of at that height. So if I want to get to about 4 inches, I need to be coming down to here. That's not quite big enough. So we're going to go to that longer piece that I have. Except I didn't make this blue piece. See, I made it a little too short. There. Easy fix. So here's a great example. Oh no, I didn't make this blue piece long enough. I don't have something to sew it to. Well, all you got to do is trim that down, right? And now it will be long enough for whatever I need. It's improv work, right? We can change things on the fly. So if I put that there, right? Now I'm going to have extra length. Lots of wiggle room down here. And then we'll add on the background piece there. That really is kind of the point of improv, is figuring out those solutions. Right, it's that expression, best laid plans. Actually don't know, I think there's more to that sentence, but I'm not sure what it is. So if anyone knows, feel free to share. Best laid plans, what? Who knows? Who knows? So I'm going to press these, and then really all we should have to do is add some little bits of background. How much background will depend on where you're at. How tall you've gotten, how wide it is. It may not be on both sides. That's all fine. So here, we'll do this. Oops. Pink and orange one first. So where am I at? 10.5 inches. That's going to get me, you know, right about there, making sure I have that wiggle room. So I really am going to be able to get 4 inches wide quite handily, which means I don't need any white, any of my background on this side, but I do need a little bit right there. So I'm going into my little trimmings, and I can just take a piece like this and sew it on and square it up. But I'm actually looking to see if I have some triangles that would fit there. I'm worried that that one will be a little bit small, just because they've already got some kind of on grain. That one's going in the wrong direction. Right, I'm just trying to use what I have. That's a good one. It's still going to be on the bias when we square up, but it's a little bit closer to grain as opposed to just adding a strip. Okay, the blue one may be a different story because of that blue. We're checking the bottom, making sure I'm kind of where I want to be width-wise. And I do need just a little bit here. If I rotate this a little bit, I need a little bit more, but I'm going to go ahead and trim that just so I can see a little bit better. Right, yeah, I do need a little one there, so I can take one of my smaller ones and sew that on. So these are effectively becoming the corners of the strip. And then we'll just have to do the other corners as well. You know, in reality, this is pretty much exactly how I did my braided rug quilt top. If you saw those blocks, this is effectively the same way. We're just doing a much more controlled color scheme for these. The other difference with these blocks beyond the controlled color scheme is I've started with a very pointy triangle, which I did not on the braided rug ones. Okay, so let's see where we're at. Again, checking the 10.5 inches at the bottom. That gives me height. If I want to go 4 inches, I need a nice big triangle there. So I'm seeing if I have one, because I did have some, right? There's like what I started with. So that's a straight edge. When I cut, that's actually going to be on grain, and this is going to give me quite a bit. So don't hesitate to explore your scraps, see what pieces you have in there that you can use, but you can be absolutely cutting from new if you need to. It's me though, so you know that I'm going into the scraps. You know I am. Okay, so we are going to be good. I may have sewed on just a little bit. There we go. Okay, so I don't need any on that side. I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to add one on that side, and we'll trim it. And if I don't like it, I can always make this orange strip skinnier and add something there. So they don't look like much when you see them this way, right? It's when we trim them down and put that order back in with those straight edges, that's where the magic will really happen. So I'm just going to shift this just a little bit so I can move that to square it up safely for myself. So I want to have 10.5 inches across the bottom and 10.5 inches, or sorry, I'm lining it up on the bottom so that I can go 10.5 inches up. I want to make sure that I have no gaps here and where I want to be. I can rotate this if I want a little bit, but I kind of liked right where it was, right like that. So I'm going up and then across. Right, so now I have one side nice and clean. And then, so this one wants to be, I can get 3.5 inches wide. Yep, 3.5 inches. Whoops, I shifted there. Seem to be missing my initial cuts these days. Got to pay attention to that. And then now the blue one, same thing. I'm going to cut this one as wide as I can, just because I want to have some wiggle room for assembling the block. Because I didn't want to do math, right? Because 10.5 inches doesn't divide evenly, and I didn't want to do math. So just going to cut it as big as I can. And then sew them together and see where we're at. And if I have to trim off, then I trim off, right? Because I know that if I cut them off 4 inches and I sew them together, it's a little bit too big. So this way I might be pretty close. Okay, so now let's talk about assembly. How do you want to assemble them? Do you want to have them all in the same direction like this? Maybe you want to rotate and have a slightly different direction. Oh, I like that. Yeah, I like that. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I could play with the order as well, right? I don't have to have them in rainbow order. I could have 2 going in one direction and 1 in the other direction. It's always maker's choice. I'm going with this because I really liked that when I put it together. Okay, so now I'm just going to sew these 2 seams double check the size of the block, and then it'll be done. And I just want to say, if you do this and your block is a little bit too small because, like me, you didn't feel like doing the math, just add a strip of your background fabric to one side. It's the easiest solution. It does nothing to detract from the block. And there's no need to remake the block. Don't feel like you need to just go, oh, I screwed up, and beat yourself up about it. Just add a strip and move on. And if it really, really bothers you, then remake just one of the sections. Don't remake the whole block. Remake just one of the sections. Make sure you make it wider this time, and it will be fine. Me, we're winging it and seeing what happens. Hoping for the best. Because I barely slept last night, so my brain is not, it's not here for the math today. Now, when it comes to pressing these seams, you can press to one side or open. That's entirely up to you. I'm pressing to one side just in the interest of time more than anything, because this block did take a little bit longer. Okay, I love the way it looks though. Yeah, definitely going with a chevron name for this. So I got, oh my God, I didn't do math and I made it exactly the size I need. I'm just going to take a bow for that, pat myself on the back, because accidentally made the block exactly the size that I need. Sometimes it works that way. It's kind of like sometimes when you're doing improv work and you get like perfect seam matching and you're like, how did that happen? You couldn't have done it if you tried. But it worked out. So there is our block for today, a chevron. Let's flip you around. We'll say goodbye to our lovely ladies for the day. I'm gonna turn around. Let's go all the way around. Sorry, didn't mean to make you dizzy. There, I had to leave the house early this morning because my son had a dentist appointment, which means I didn't do my hair. So it's kind of driving me nuts, but that's all right. So there she is. Definitely calling it a chevron for the week. I think it's going to be a great addition to the quilt. It's a nice contrast with the points compared to last week's sort of more angular horizontal vertical kind of lines. So it'll be a really good kind of addition to the quilt there. I'm going to let you go. This was a longer block. There is a lot more sewing and back and forthing to the machine and stuff like that. So I'm going to let you go there. This has been another week 41 of the Quilters Playcation Adventure Sew-Along. I am your host, Cheryl Arkison. In 2024 here, we've been playing with rainbows and having a great time with it. I'm coming to you from the new studio where I am planning courses and events and lots of fun things. So I am so looking forward to playing with you more and more as time goes on. Thank you very much for being here. We will see you next time, folks. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.